Welcome to the Elite Power Moves podcast, where we unlock the secrets to level up in all areas of life. I'll be interviewing some of the world's top performers in their fields so that you can uncover and learn the strategies that have led to their overall success and apply it to your own life.
Welcome to the Elite Power Moves Powerful People podcast. And today we have one of our great Australians, Paul Roos. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Paul, I know you're a busy man, so I'm going to get stuck straight into it and ask you some of the questions that a lot of our leaders want to hear. Paul, you've had an amazing career both as a player and a coach in the AFL. Can you share some of the pivotal moments in your journey that shaped your understanding of effective leadership?
Yeah, there's no doubt that I didn't realise at the time, but probably the biggest thing happened going to the Fitzroy Football Club. And again, when you go down to a club at 16 or 17 years of age, you have no idea what to expect. But it wasn't long that I was there that I realised what a good group of human beings they were. Yeah, the leaders and the best players. Yeah, Bernie Quinlan, Gary Wilson were probably two of the top 20 players in the competition. Bernie won a Brownlow medal. And I realised pretty quickly, as I said, that, geez, these people, the way they act and behave, I can't help but do it myself, because if our best players do it. So I realised pretty quickly leadership is role modelling behaviour. Now, sometimes, as you would know, sometimes leaders have bad behaviour, so it tends to drive you down the wrong path. But what I realised is I was really lucky to go to that football club, because the leaders, Bernie Quinlan, Gary Wilson, Laurie Serafini, Mickey Conlon, all those guys were just great role models, good people. And I think that was the first eye-opener, even though I didn't really realise at the time. But when I look back now with all the stuff that I'm doing, that was probably the biggest moment. Probably, if I go through them in order, probably the second one is just reaffirming that throughout my playing career for 17 years, that leadership is about role modelling behaviours. You can't ask someone to do something that you're not prepared to do it yourself. I became captain, went up to Sydney as a leader. And then when I started coaching, I think the other thing was, how do we systemise culture? No one really done it in the AFL. And I think that was the next one. We systemised our culture. We came up with a culture code at Coffs Harbour, and we picked our leadership group. We voted. We got the players to vote on the leadership group. And that was really pivotal. At the time, we had no idea the impact it was going to have, certainly not on ourselves, let alone the whole AFL industry. But they're probably, if I was to pick, 2 or 3, 4 things, I think they would be the things that have really shaped my leadership style over the years.
Paul, in your opinion, what are the key components that define high-performing settings in teams, and how do leaders implement the culture to achieving these high-performing standards?
Yeah, I think the high-performing standards have to start with the leaders, and that's one thing I'm really strong on. Whether it's a footy club, whether it's a business, whether it's your executive team, whether it's your coaching group with your leadership group. But you've also got to start with who do you want to be? What do you want to stand for? Otherwise you're sort of walking around the dark trying to work it out. So I think they're the pivotal things. Who do you want to be? Collectively understand that, and then hold each other accountable. Football clubs, high-performing football clubs, review really well. They review their performance. They work out what went well. They reward for really good behaviour. They challenge poor behaviour. And then they have really honest conversations. But they also build strong relationships. I think those pillars are really important, regardless of whether it's a football team or a corporation.
That's awesome. 100%. Paul, with your experience turning around teams like the Sydney Swans, what strategies did you find most effective in building strong winning cultures within organisations?
Yeah, when I coached Sydney, we'd come off the back of some reasonable success, but we still probably didn't really know who we were and where we wanted to go. Again, so we did that at Coffs Harbour, and it worked unbelievably well. It worked probably way better than I thought it was going to work. And then the team picking the leaders, and then Stewie Maxfield becoming captain was really pivotal. Probably when I went to Melbourne, realising that sometimes you've got to start at a different level. The same pillars, the same system. We went down to Sorrento, but that team had won 2 games and lost 20 and had 6 years of losing. So we probably had to start at a lot lower And the education of the leadership group was the start of it. I did 2 reviews at Melbourne, whereas at Sydney, the leaders were probably ready to lead because of the success that we'd had under Rodney Eade and the senior players that we'd had, whereas Melbourne had 6 years of underperforming. So I think that the biggest difference, what I realised, the system is the same, but where you start and how you go about things can be vastly different.
100% agree with that, Paul. Paul, every team faces challenges and setbacks. How do you approach leadership during times of adversity to ensure that the team remains focused and motivated?
I think building strong relationships is one of the most undervalued part of being a leader. And you've got to be intentional with building relationships. And I think what I learned from the Melbourne Football Club, we were in for adversity. You know, I was never going to turn that footy club around in the space of 6 months. They'd won 2 games the year before, so there was going to be adversity. So I remember, as well as the cultural side and the culture code and all that, I remember saying to my assistant coaches who'd all come from Sydney, apart from Jade Rawlings, who was at Melbourne, get out. We have to build strong relationships. Yeah, because we can have some honest conversations. We have to, in order for this to become a high-performing organisation, we're going to have to build strong relationships and have really honest conversations. So I think if we build strong relationships, then we don't have to worry too much. Are we going through a really good period or are we going through a really bad period? Then we have consistency of behaviours and consistency of conversations. We still reward good behaviour and we still hold people accountable for poor behaviour. But I think relationship building and intentional relationship building is really undervalued in the corporate world.
100% agree with that, Paul. Paul, effective communication is often cited as a critical skill for leaders. Can you discuss how you've utilized communication to foster trust and alignment within your teams?
Probably some of the biggest lessons I learned through football was around communication, because when I started football, we were a part-time, business, really. We're semi-professional. And to be fair to my original coaches, they didn't have time to communicate with every single player. But what I learned from that was that you used to hate learning from the boot starter or the doctor or the masseuse. Oh, you're not playing this week, or such and such got dropped or whatever. And then suddenly, things that were relatively simple became complicated. So what I learned from that is you have to take time to communicate. And that's one of the main roles of a leader. You don't want people hearing things second and third, and it is time consuming. And I'm really clear on this with leaders. Leadership is hard. If you want a magic pill to become a leader, it's not out there. Building relationships is really hard. Having honest conversations face to face is really hard. And being a really good, clear communicator. And I think that is absolutely, as you said, one of the keys to being a good leader.
100%. Paul, for individuals aspiring to leadership roles, what advice would you give them to cultivate their leadership skills to drive high performance within their teams?
It's a really good question, that. It's funny because I've been doing a lot of work with my son, who runs a mentoring program called Prince the King, and he mainly mentors young boys. And it's interesting, through that question, what I've realised is no one's actually teaching leadership. So what we've actually established is a father-son leadership program for 16 plus kids. And the reason I bring that up is because the earlier you can learn the skills, the better you're going to be, the further you're going to be ahead. So what I would recommend is, wherever you are, workplaces are really good at teaching the technical skills of the job. I'm a marketing person. I'm really good. They teach me what marketing is, but they're not teaching me leadership. The IT person is learning about IT, but not learning about leadership. A salesperson is learning about sales, but not really learning about leadership. So explore it, get a mentor, look for programs that will teach leadership. Because what happens is, and I guarantee this, we see this a lot in executive teams. Suddenly we get to an executive team and we're actually asked to stop marketing and stop doing the IT and stop doing the sales and actually lead people, empower people, build relationships with people, be an authentic leader, bring people on the ride, and we suddenly get there and no one's taught us those skills. And again, that's one of the reasons we've started this program, because no one is teaching leadership. And even schools, the The high school system, the university system, no one teaches leadership. So you get into a system and you're really good at getting taught the technical skills. So my answer would be just source out as many programs as you can which talk about leadership skills, and it'll definitely help you in the long run.
Paul, I really yeah, I really vibing off what you're saying now, and it's 100% true. We've talked about obviously schools not teaching about money. They don't teach about failure and adversity and resilience. And these are the things that we need to have when we're leaders. I think just to mix up the questions, Paul, I'm a big fan of generational legacy, and it looks like your son Dylan is following in your footsteps. How important is it for you watching the impact you've made on your kids' lives?
It's massive. Like people ask me about all my achievements, and being the Father of the Year, 2008 Australian Father of the Year was awesome. And again, we're leaders of our families, So what I realize is kids are watching us constantly. And Dylan reminds me, and it was interesting, I did a podcast with Dylan once and he was asked, and I hadn't heard him answer this question. He said, "What do you remember most about your dad?" And I'm thinking it's, I got to hold up the Premiership Cup and, got to meet, all the great players of Sydney and Melbourne. But you know what he said? He said, "I remember my dad making an effort when he coached in Perth to come back on the red eye and coach me on a Sunday." And it really hit me when he said that we're looking for these big moments. We think as parents, sometimes it's, waiting, and then all of a sudden we're going to Aspen for a holiday, we're going to Disneyland or whatever. And when he said that, it really hit home that everything you're doing as a parent, the kids are watching. And as you said, now the fact that we're working together in 5 years, last 5 years, he's been working on his mentoring program, done an amazing job, works really well with kids 13 to sort of 22, working with the parents. But now, probably not until now, I fully understand. And this is my message to parents out there. You're getting watched constantly by your kids, and everything you're doing is having an impact either positively or negatively on their growth and development.
100%. Paul, because we're making good time, I wanted to ask another question because it sort of just dug out a few things for me. I personally, Paul, used to be 145 kilos, grew up in an identity around, I don't know if you relate to this, but my grandparents come back from war and thought asking for help is a sign of weakness. We need to tough it out. We need to work and grind. And that domino then fell onto my dad, and then it to me. And it was part of my identity and my programming from a kid where I really needed to step out of the way from that domino so I didn't pass it on to my kid. And I guess having a good role model and a leader, not only in an organization, but a father, is crucial. It really is, because that's when their identity is formed from that 1 to 7.
It's interesting. So sorry, go on, Michael. Yeah,
no. I just like seeing your what you're doing with Dylan and your leadership skills. That's why I love following men like you, because I know that I'm going to make a massive impact in my son's life as well.
Yeah, it's funny because one thing I talked to the parents in Dylan's program is I think I was a good parent. I think Tammy was a really good parent as well. But we were fortunate to have a footy club around us. So we had those mentors around us. So I could always word up, Kirky or Stewie Maxfield to say to Dylan something that I'd said to him the day before. And that's what you're talking about. So the program we try and run is really just to help parents navigate this crazy world we're in. And we also know, particularly with boys, there's a period where they stop listening to mum and dad, so we've got this great community around us that can help us. So this is not about being a good parent or a bad parent at all, with looking for a mentor. Some of the best coaches, some of the best players, and Roger Federer had a coach for 17 years. Michael Jordan had coaches. When we look at high performing athletes, and it's starting to filter in the corporate world, as you know. A lot more corporates now but if you look at high-performing athletes, they all have coaches and mentors. AFL players go down to a footy club at 18. So why shouldn't we all enjoy that and help each other to create this amazing environment for our kids to become better. And that's why I love what I do with Performance by Design, but I also love what I do with Dylan and his program as well.
Paul, that's awesome. That sort of made me mix up my questions a bit today, but I feel like this question would be great to put to real but I guess Paul, as a busy, high functioning human, how important is it for us to be able to ask for help and reach out to coaches to advance our skills, to overcome adversity and improve our leadership?
Well, it's funny. I always say this to the corporate world. There's no such thing as a perfect leader. And I think that's the starting point. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. There's no such thing as a perfect CEO. There's no such as a perfect sales manager, a coach. I've never come across them. And part of what you're asking is it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I need help, because high performing organizations all work collectively together. And one of the most important things as a leader is self-awareness. What I'm good at and what I'm not good at. The greatest impediment to success for some leaders is ego, because they won't ask for help. They think they know everything. And you know what? They just piss everyone off. And eventually people want to stop working for them because they don't trust them, because they'll do your work for you. If you do a good job, they won't say, well done. They won't ask for help. They won't ask questions. And you're absolutely right. I think a really good strength now is asking for help, or saying, actually, I don't know that. Can someone help me in the room? Let me get back to you. That's a really good question. Let me get back to you. And then going and asking the expert in the marketing or the IT, or in my case, stoppages or whatever it is. And I think it's a strength now rather than a weakness. And you made a really good point. I was the same when I grew up. My dad was pretty stoic. He was a good guy, really good guy, but go to work, come home, look after the kids, so you're brought up in that environment. But I say this a lot. We want our kids to be better versions of ourselves. Take the good stuff and get rid of the rubbish. I want Dylan and Tyler to be better dads than I am. And I think I'm a good dad. My dad was a good dad as well. But if we look at, and I think a big part of it is this authenticity, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to ask questions. And I absolutely believe that the best leaders do that the best.
Paul, I think it's really valuable that what you're teaching your son as well, and how you talked about asking for help is not a sign of weakness, because this sort of gets rid of that identity that we're brought up in. Because I feel that, like, being a busy CEO or executive, taking care of your team, then turning up to be the best husband, to be the best father, is sometimes literally impossible. Like, where do we find time for health and mindset? So I think it's really important that people hear that, especially with what Dylan's obviously doing with younger generation, to teach them that to be vulnerable is to be healthy. Paul, I always say, sometimes a man has to put down the sword and take off the armor that we're wrapped so tight, because it's only when we're truly vulnerable that we will start the transformation journey. It's just
I think on that too is people want to help, and I say this to executive teams, and parents want to help their kids, and often the kids want to help the parents. They're a bit stubborn at 14, 15 and 16, but people want to help you. But if you've got this stoic veneer with the sword, as you said, in the suit of armor, you actually become someone that people potentially don't want to help, even if you eventually cry out for help. And then often it's too late. It's like the boy that cried wolf. But people want to help other people. And we say this a lot in our exec team meetings. We've got workshops, is you're a team. And that's the great thing about being involved in football club. You absolutely understand the value of the team and the value of the role. And every role is really important. But there's a lot of vulnerability now in AFL football clubs, and we see it publicly now in the papers and so forth. So, you're absolutely right. It's a sign of strength. And again, when I'm working with the parents and the boys, and that's why I'm looking forward to the King's Table, is with the parents working together with the boys, and we've also got some even parents of kids that aren't in the program that are going to take it on board themselves, a couple of young executives as well, just to learn about those concepts, to put them in place no matter what that is, in the home environment, in the work environment, in the local, footy club environment or sporting club, or I'm on the school committee or whatever, because the sooner you learn the things that you and I are talking about today, you're going to race up the org chart, because a lot of people aren't getting taught them, and they think I know everything, and they don't want to go out and learn, and they don't want to develop themselves as a greater, more well-rounded human being.
Yeah, Paul, I feel like we all have our ego, and like as we mentioned, asking for help is sometimes putting down that sword and armor. But I like to have a saying where it's the cave that we fear entering, we have no time to enter, usually holds the treasure that we seek. And it's when we enter the cave and bring that into the light is when we're fully going to transform. And as we all know, we're always learning in life. We're always evolving, with whether it be with our performance in our teams, our business, our health. I don't think we can ever know it all. Paul, I guess my another question, just taking this energy conversation. Paul, I used to be a transactional leader where I told my team to do a task, I would check it, I would go back over it, and I never really got any of my work done. But then I turned into a transformational leader where I give my team an outcome, I measure it, and like we're climbing to the mountain, it's 200 feet every day. And then I'd coach them to become the leaders and take over roles. And this created so much free energy in my life. And I was able to create more freedom with my family and more fulfillment. What are your thoughts in leadership styles?
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the nicest things anyone ever wrote about me is Rob Jackson, who was the fitness coach at the Melbourne Football Club, and he wrote me this amazing note when I finished at Melbourne. And I'm not going to go the whole thing, but it was along the lines of, Roos, I always thought every coach was the same. And then when, I was a really transactional, he didn't use those words, but he said I was a transactional coach. And then when I saw you come in and you won their hearts before you won their mind, and it was, I put it in the book that I've got. I asked him if I could use it as a forward in the book. And I guess what I found is exactly what you're saying. If we can empower people and really think we care about them, then it actually opens up time for us. It's funny. Like I was never one that was going to be at work at 6 a.m. and 8 at night. Like I was one that wanted my staff to do their job, wanted them to go home, wanted them to come to work really energized because they'd seen their family, they'd had dinner with their family. Because you can always open your computer when the kids go to bed at 9:30 at night. And I think part of that is you as a person should be the same as you are at work as you are at home. There's this nonsense saying that's this work-life balance. It's not work-life balance. It's life balance. How is your life going? Because work-life balance suggests that when I go to work, I haven't got a wife and 2 kids. And when I go home, I haven't got a job. I mean, that's just an unrealistic way to look at things. Whereas life balance, you can always then start to, audit yourself and go, geez, how did I go today? Did I give enough time to my wife? Did I give enough time to my kids? Did I give enough time to people at work? Did I spend enough time at work? Did I spend enough time? Now, doesn't mean you're going to get it absolutely right. But what it does mean is you're always mindful as a husband, you're also a coach, and as a coach, you're also a husband and a father. And you've got a lot better opportunity to do that than the other way when you're talking about work-life balance. It just doesn't work like that. And I think the things you're talking about are absolutely right. If we can start with ourselves and looking after ourselves is health-wise, whether it's eating or whatever, but it's also, I can look after myself better if I empower you to do your job, because then I don't have to worry about every one of my players and every one of my staff, because I've empowered you. You mentioned the word coaching. Good leaders are good coaches, and good leaders are good communicators. We've talked about good leaders that build good relationships, but we still have high standards. And that's the navigation piece. Relationships, standards. This week, I've got to work on standards. Next week, I'll probably be a bit harder on the standards. I'm going to make sure everyone's okay. But what you're saying is absolutely right. But again, it's hard, and we've got to keep getting the balance right of all the mechanics of being a great leader.
100%. I love hearing everything you're talking about, mate. As I said, you're probably in my top 5 guys I love to follow. And I guess, Paul, my last question is, Paul, here it is, coaching leadership for life. Can you share your key takeaways from your book?
I think one of the key things I did, and I talk about this a lot now, is in October 1998, the concepts we're talking about. I retired in October 1998, and I happened to sit down and write the things I liked about my leaders and things I didn't like about my leaders. And that was a transitional phase from being semi-professional to professional. And the way I talk about it now is, if we're talking purely leadership, the question we ask is, are you the leader you wish you had? And I'll say that again. Are you the leader you wish you had? Now, there's 2 ways to look at leadership. One is, what do I want to give the people that I'm leading today? Number 2, which is more effective, what do they need from me? What do they need from me today? Not what do I want to give them? They're 2 completely different concepts. And I think I learned that when I wrote down as a player what I wanted from a leader. And what was I getting and what wasn't I getting? And that really shaped my whole beliefs as a leader, and it held me accountable. I had that document in my desk for 8.5 years, coaching Sydney, and I took it out for 3 years coaching the Melbourne Football Club. So that was absolutely key. And I always look back on and this is the impact on leaders, and leaders being parents, and leaders being, the local netball club, footy club, wherever it is. The impact is far outweighs that one situation that you're in with that leader in the business or wherever it is. And when I look back on now, I've been to 2 funerals of 2 teammates in the last 12 months. One was Matty Randell, passed away at 64. One was Rossi Thornton, passed away about the same age. And we didn't talk about wins and losses. The funeral was not about who we beat and who beat us. The funerals, we all talked about the behaviours and the great times that we had together. And that's the value of having a great leader. It's a legacy. You talk about legacy before. The legacy far outweighs what are you going to do at this club. It's about life skills, and it's going to sit with you for the rest of your life. If you're a good leader, you're going to have an amazing impact on people's lives. And that's what I learned from the days at Fitzroy. That's what we implemented. And I'm really proud that Sydney Swans are on top of the ladder, at one loss. And, Johnny Longmire, who was with me in the room at Coffs Harbour, and still some of those players that are coaches now, Brett Kirk, Benny Matthews was there originally, Eamon Buchanan was there, Jared McVeigh come just after it, Nick Davis is there still. So, I mean, that's the enduring, the legacy piece is a great way to look at it. What is the legacy I'm leaving the people that I'm leading?
Paul, that was probably one of the best podcast flows I've ever done.
Thank you for tuning in today, and I hope you found the discussion useful. Our goal is to positively impact the well-being of 1 million people's lives just like you by sharing the experience and knowledge of some of the world's top performers. So you don't miss out on any key strategies to help you succeed, make sure you hit the subscribe button below. And if you think you may know someone that would benefit from this episode, join us in our mission of impacting 1 million lives and share it with your friends.